my name is Chandra Kost, and I am with Beacons of Light, and I have Alexsandra with me, and she's going to go over her services, and then we'll get into her spiritual journey.
Okay, so my spiritual services are basically for people who are either on the beginning of their journey, trying to find answers, seeking for truth, healing, who want to, understand their spiritual gifts, because I find that most challenging. Basically, I try to incorporate astrology with energy healing, which happens on conscious and unconscious and subconscious level. Like, it's a multi-dimensional experience.
Yeah.
So astrology helps to cover most grounds throughout the timeline that we have this lifetime chronologically as we experience it, milestones in our lives, whether traumatic or healing. And so it's really important to cover all grounds and kind of understand our journey and our healing and our consciousness as from a perspective of wholeness. So astrology helps to reduce the time that we need in session, because it gives an access into our energy blueprint, where we can find those clues and find those moments in time, perhaps. And also I incorporated into training of our spiritual gifts, because it explains and portrays how our energy blends work together in kind of like an alchemizing way, how our gifts will be responding into in relation to our environment or stimulation.
Right.
So it's kind of like I usually try to offer package service, including astrology, energy healing, and spiritual gifts training, because, of this idea of wholeness, that kind of like all of these aspects of ourselves and our lives interact together to create this dynamic that we experience, in our daily lives.
Great. I find that so interesting. I love astrology. I bet that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's great. That's wonderful. Would you like to share your spiritual journey, and then we'll go back into some of your services after again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
Well, my spiritual journey, and the more I progress, the more it kind of like leads me backwards to find all the clues and understand how early it's actually beginning. That somehow it's even getting difficult to pinpoint the beginning, because it's like all of these things working together. And recently I've actually been led into my infancy. So this is like the earliest place in this lifetime that I remember, things happening that had some sort of significance to my spiritual journey. But it's also about intersecting paths, because spirituality is not something that is like out there. It's not an abstraction. It's something that is like very existential. It's something that we put in practice without realizing, like, washing dishes equals to meditation, and dancing equals to meditation of a different kind. So, mindfulness and let's say meditation as a practice of awareness of our consciousness, of our presence in our environment, in our physical vessel, is something that is openly accessible to anybody who is, trying to observe and be self-aware and not get entangled into our spiritual energy, in a sense that like we perceive it that it's somewhere over there, and in a sense escape our bodies and escape our environment
Yes.
mentally or emotionally, because the here and now can only happen in the present. And so, in my spiritual journey, it's always kind of been there. It's just me who took the time to actually realize that it has. And I believe that for most people, it can also be true in so many ways, that just because you aren't aware of something doesn't mean that it's not there.
Right, right.
And, I go back and I look at my relationships, and, yesterday I had a situation where something in my memories comes up, something that I wrote years ago, and I look back and I'm like, I was actually more aware than I was realizing.
Yes.
So, we kind of like try to find a beginning, like some sort of traumatic event, and kind of like assign it a meaning or like interpretation that, like, I actually wrote an article for my blog calling The Joke of Enlightenment, about Buddha's journey into enlightenment. And so, understanding the path as some more of a sequence than an isolated event. And this also relates to our trauma. And trauma is also an overwhelming, intense event such as enlightenment, but on the opposite side of the scale.
Right.
So we, because of the intensity, we kind of like grasp for these moments in time, attributing them a meaning than they don't have on their own.
Right.
Because it's just, let's say, an orgasm of consciousness, orgasm of awareness, moment of culmination.
Right.
But not as something that is like, has no, history or no consequence.
Yeah.
So this journey and this awakening, we awaken to so many things within ourselves. We heal so many things within ourselves. And we have this, it's very hard to describe my spiritual journey except in stories that have some significance. And I find kind of a teaching moment in those stories.
Yes.
And not see it from a perspective of wholeness as well.
Right.
So when I look at my journey from a perspective of wholeness, I see a mosaic of some sort, a layering, different colors placed in one picture.
Right.
It's like, for me, let's say, spiritual journey, this is the issue when people think that spiritual journey is sitting somewhere in a cave meditating or isolating oneself. But for me, spiritual journey has not only been in relation to healing, as much as I try to help people in healing, but also, let's say, my musical journey and artistic journey, because in order to teach myself how to sing and even have the access to that part of myself to develop it, I had to heal myself. I had to heal my creative blockages. I had to dissolve my ego so that my voice would come out. I had to stand by my truth. I had to become an authority in my body and find alignment in my physical body and understand that we are one. That because of that perspective of oneness, my voice is mine to distribute and it's my message, and kind of like what is more spiritual than that? And what
Yeah.
is more healing than that? Than self-discovery and, in these very mundane, practical ways, very accessible, very, something that we're all aware of without realizing that we are.
Right.
So, when I was younger, I thought, well, maybe I should be, I should move into a monastery and become a nun and kind of like have this like hermit, lifestyle. But as much as, it sounded appealing, it just felt off. I felt like I need to be among people. I had to make the connection. I had to evolve in these, ways, like, let's say, guided by my relationships, transforming my self-worth, or, victim mentality, or my intimacy issues.
Right.
So it's very like a day-to-day thing. And then it's all of these things that teach me something deeply spiritual, deeply universal. So we grow and expand in height and depth, and
Right.
whenever we allow ourselves to be something other than we understand that we are, we heal and evolve.
Right. I also know that as I've done my work, I also connect with people through what I've healed. I find I understand their problem and able to help them more. Does that work for you that way too, or?
Yes, of course, because, as much as we can always apply to other people what is true to, ourselves, but at the same time, we have to find this correlation and understand that experience, at least, even though for them it may be different. But what I find is something very common is that in our differences, we are all the same.
Yeah.
It's like we have the same components that work differently, like everybody has a chakra system, and not everybody's chakra system is the same. It has nuances. The certain energy can be manifesting in a multitude of ways.
Right.
But our, let's say, blueprint, which is, also getting me back to astrology, is that in astrology you have 12 houses, you have as much planets and points, as in every chart you see has the same blueprint. Right. But how it works internally is completely different. This is why I love, let's say, going back to our childhood programming, is because, and not even that, if you say the same thing to two different people, they will respond differently because of their own wiring, because of their own conditioning. But, it's, I think it's really cool that we can connect, maybe not in, from the perspective of sameness, in a sense of your experiences is same as mine, but maybe through the ability, let's say that I understand that you have the ability to experience pain, happiness, pleasure, to, think, to overcome, to evolve, right? So it's kind of like, maybe this is why I love I love my work, because everybody's so unique.
Yes.
So unique. Every journey is so unique. And at the same time, it's like, I've seen this in so many different ways, this one thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. So are there any, like when you're working with people, are there anything you do to prepare to work with people? Do you get their information? You know, you say you do charts, so do you,
Yeah.
um,
Well, it's kind of like when it comes to like session itself, I feel like there's like two sides of this question. First, like self preparation. I feel like we have to be in a really good place to help out other people. So I
right,
feel like everything that we are and everything that we experience is a preparation. Because I find like I'm not like a marketing type of person. I work by resonance and alignment,
yeah,
So like whoever is drawn to me, like I have people coming requesting my services always on schedule, but it's like a universal schedule.
right,
So this is kind of like a thing that I don't have to like, concern myself too much with what client's gonna be next, because they come in perfect synchronized alignment with where I am and what I'm going through.
right,
So whenever we meet or people are drawn, they're like drawn by this, pull of their own internal guidance. And so the preparation, whether people realize it or not, is always happening on like through all dimensions and
yeah,
plane, like universally the preparation is happening there, and our work together has always, been kind of like it's brought into perspective by our encounters. But of course, like this is the benefit, most benefit that I've found with astrology is that since you mentioned it, like that was a really good point, because for me to read a chart, it takes about an hour and a half, give or take. And in that hour and a half, I can basically see the entire timeline or relevant experiences, or the way that some people might potentially respond to a situation that has happened to them, like that internal wiring, that internal conditioning. It kind of like this is a preparation to every next session that we're going to have. This is like an opening of a door into their blueprint, into their Akashic records, their consciousness. And then, so for me, I always do the first session with astrology chart reading. It's like a must do, must have. It saves us time because it gives us a map of sorts.
right,
So in that sense, this is like the moment I always, leave my clients free space to decide what they want to do after that first session with chart reading. So I'm really open basically to people, deciding like this is enough information for me. I'd like to try do something on my own. And some people prefer to have assistance, so that's amazing
right,
because it's kind of like I love doing more work. Obviously, it's kind of like when we get in session, it's pretty messy usually. This is kind of like where I prepare myself. I do have to prepare my clients just to make them understand what they're getting into, because dealing with, let's say, trauma and, kind of like the reason why there's, a lot of repressed energy, suppressed energy in the subconscious is because most people spend majority of their lives suppressing trauma, unpleasant, events, whatever. So it gets, it piles up. And this is a problem, and I think it's a problem in times of ascension, and it's a problem because these energy waves are increasing in intensity and light codes are just pouring down, is that doing work gradually is easier on your entire being to adapt, your body to adapt and to integrate gradually as well. But if you're having all of your shocking experiences, traumatic experiences of your pain dealt in one instant, is going to rip you apart energetically. It's a lot of energy. It's like an atomic bomb exploding in your being.
Right.
So like I I feel everything that my clients go through.
Yeah.
Everything, because I have, my empathic abilities are like very developed at this point. So, as you say, like no judgment and whatever, like we can't judge the experience. We cannot avoid pain and like push it under the rug when it's like meant to surface for healing.
Right.
So this is what everybody needs to be prepared for, is that it's going to get messy. It's going to get uncomfortable. I'm not the one to like make it easy for people, because I know what they're getting by taking, the hard way of like actually putting those thick gloves on and just dealing with the mess. And actually, like it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Right.
So just understanding that's like it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. That's like most preparation that like people need to have. But the realization that trauma and suppressed energy is like even unlocking family frequencies, like family karma, ancestral stuff, and like whatever. I love just the fact that somebody says, ancestor left us a lot of like gifts as inheritance. They didn't leave just trauma.
Right.
So we have to understand like to what magnitude, how much energy that is that we have the collective, we have our lifetime experiences from this lifetime, we have ancestral DNA encoding and decoding and repairing, like DNA on like a quantum level.
Right.
It's a lot of work. So it's so much better to do it gradually, but also not doing it. And especially, this is the part, is that a lot of people don't trust, spiritual workers, which is what I'm noticing. Not everybody, some people want help. But the trust, whenever we have trust issues, we have to understand that having trust issues is a problem that needs to be solved. Right. First and foremost, because when you get in session, when you get in healing, you have to trust yourself to go through the process. You have to trust the universe, your higher self, that the person that you chose to work with is going to benefit you whether you know how or not.
Right.
So the trust, also to trust your judgment, your experience, trust your intuition when the experience becomes uncomfortable, when you're like having growing pains. You have to trust your intuition to guide you that you're on the right way, that it's not just to hurt you, that it's not to like harmful in any way. So trust is like so important. Then there's like the limiting beliefs about money. Like a lot of people have issues with money. It's like, oh, that's like too expensive. But quality of our lives is not anyhow, it's priceless.
Yeah.
It's just priceless. You can't put a value, a price on your, life's value.
Right.
Because if you believe that you deserve to live a healthy life, I'm not saying I don't know what, right? Like the healthy life, to experience health in your consciousness, in your being, which also results as physical health, because that's the natural consequence of also physically not having illness stored in your body, because what illness is just molded negative energy. It's creating a focal point that recreates all the type of like traumatic, painful experiences to then become a physically visible condition.
Right. I find like when I've done the work that it's painful, but now as an adult, I can go back and fix all my childhood traumas, and they might not have been that big, but I'm able to do it now. And that was, I stuffed, you can't deal with it as a kid, but now as an adult you can, so it's helpful. And even though it was painful going back and working with the trauma, after that, oh my gosh, like you feel so good. I mean, because it sounds scary, and it can be, but it doesn't have to be. But yeah.
Especially if you're approaching your fear from a point of maturity, and especially the point of power, because you're not like, stepping into like the victimized response towards your fear or your trauma. You're actually becoming that authority that you need to, for your inner child to rely on. You're the one who has the ability to take care of yourself. So this is, healing and coming into healing. And especially, I don't like accepting people in session who aren't standing in their power to make the change. This is the big one for me, because I cannot convince somebody that they can do it. I can support them. I can't convince people to trust me. This is not my job. My job is to clarify some things to them, to have a sort of a paradigm shift that they will be working on, because the work doesn't stop where our sessions stop. That's the big deal. Even if I clear their entire internal environment, which I have done for people, although the extensive work, like it can go further and further, but let's say I've done some really big work on people before. The thing is that once you clean your apartment, you still have to keep cleaning it. So it's not gonna stay like that on its own, right? So, as much as we dig into the kind of like extended shock resistant and everything, it's automated for the most part. I have to say, like there's a lot of stuff that kind of like happens in kind of just on its own, right? Like we're breathing on our own without having to try too hard to do it. But at the same time, even with this experience, and I have trained myself many years, like my, let's say, first dark night of the soul, I'm not gonna say only one, right? Because the more you evolve, the more challenging it will be, because now you're at the CEO floor. So you're still crying in the bathroom, but it's a CEO bathroom and not like a janitor, like underground level.
Right.
But you still have work to do, even more work, but with more skills.
Right.
So it kind of like compensate because you now have more skills, you have more sense of direction, you're more in tune with your guidance, but the work is still going to be there and
Right.
it's going to get intense. So it's kind of like this really crazy experience is that I can provide the support to people, but I cannot do the commitment for them. I cannot be ready for them. In my opinion, if they request my service, that's the point where they should be ready to go all the way.
Right.
Because they're not doing it for me, they're doing it for themselves.
Right. I just want to go back a little. Like you said, not just one dark night of the soul, you have many. And I found with myself that they don't last as long when I'm going through them because you have the skills now. So they're probably a couple hours versus a week or two or a month. Some people go a long time.
Yeah. I guess it just depends on the experience.
Right.
But let's say what happened to me. I mean, different stuff. Let's say in 2011, 12, something like that, there was a situation with both of my parents lost their jobs.
Right.
Around the same time. I was in college, but I just broken up just a huge relationship. We were like thinking about getting married and stuff. Like it was like a really deep involvement. And I had to end that relationship, although it was very hard to do. But I just found that like, when you have that like realization, okay, I love you, but in the long term, this is not what I want to build. Like, this is not the setting that I want to have. When you think about marriage, is like a big commitment. So, as any personal investment, you got to realize what you're getting yourself into and what it's going to look like, because now it's good. But if you see something and you can or don't want to work around it, it's better to just not do it than do it poorly.
Right. Yeah.
So
I like that, to do it poorly. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, and it was a very, very good decision. I had like some major breaking points in my life like that. After a while, I also dropped my college, which is, you could say, a certain type of spiritual awakening, because that moment is something that I clearly remember is stepping into my power, at least when it comes to like, even when I see myself as a guide or a healer or a coach or whatever, I try to push people into their own power.
Right.
Into being the authority in your life, being the central sun of your universe, right?
Yeah. And that's important. Yeah.
So, yeah. And for me, it was a breaking point, because at the time when I dropped college, and I was listening to Steve Jobs saying about how he quit college in order to, like he was like, this is not working out for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I heard that, and it kind of like gave me the encouragement I needed to follow my intuition, because if you get a chance, or if you have, Steve Jobs did a Stanford commandment speech where he talked about following your intuition. So, it kind of gave me this encouragement, because I thought, who is to say that this is the right path for me?
Right.
And who is to say that if I don't, don't do that, that my life is going to be a failure?
Right.
And that's kind of like, this fear that people have around achievement, around fulfilling other people's expectation. For me, that was an awakening into my power. It's like, you're like, nobody can tell me what to do, and I had to have faith to do it. Right. I had to go through, that like unsettling feeling of like, I am a nobody now.
Right. And we all go through that.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm a nobody now. Who am I without my education? I've lost ground. I've lost my identity reference.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. So, that was, if I can just isolate a moment to say, like, that's my spiritual awakening, I would say it was that.
Yeah.
Wow. I would, because that's kind of like where I felt I had access to myself for the first time.
Right.
Or the first time that I remembered that I had it, like,
you have power. You're empowered. Yeah. Unbelievable. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
That's exactly coming so brilliant as with the subject, because I feel like that's kind of the thing that, when we become authority in our body, we become authority in our choices, in our thoughts, in our like emotional body, we take ownership.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, that was such a good choice of words there, really. Because everything else that was kind of like what I was going by was other people's opinion in my head.
Right. I get that. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So you talked about Steve Jobs. Was there other people that have helped you along the way that maybe?
Oh, yes.
Could you cover a little bit of that? That would be.
Yes, of course. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I kind of like see entirely my environment as a facilitator for, the changes that I've been going through and kind of like the learning, because, when I was younger, I liked to read a lot, and I was like an overachiever of sorts, like even in my primary school, instead, like I was holding class instead of my teachers. So I guess it was obvious I like to teach. Yeah. It's like a natural conclusion, but that's kind of like, the joke of enlightenment is, kind of like a plot twist is like, like going from overachiever to like, I'm gonna be a complete loser now, but I'm gonna get myself back.
Yeah, but now you are a teacher, and you were a teacher, so it's coming full circle.
That's exactly. Yeah. But when it comes to other people, I mean, that's kind of the thing, and also something that I wanted to say, that every learning, and this is kind of like an issue in the spiritual community for the most part, is that, going back to, making spiritual experience practical, grounding it basically is, the terminology that we use.
Yes.
So to me, let's say astrology, a lot of people suck at astrology. I mean, I'm not saying who. It's just something that I notice is because they go by the theoretical knowledge served from somebody else, right?
Right, right.
For me, astrology is us having this conversation.
Right.
For me, astrology is when I get into relationship and we create a relational dynamic that I can actually experience. And the way that, let's say, you know, I mean, there's like, everybody's talking about sun signs. So like somebody's like a Sagittarius and blah, blah, blah. They have these like qualities, waves of behavior, whatever.
Right.
But then when you get into a relationship, you don't have your sun signs interact for the most part. You have interaspects of your two charts working, in some sort of dynamic, a system they create amongst themselves. So maybe, like, let's say I was seeing a guy who is a Gemini and I'm a Libra, but then at the same time, this Gemini guy, like, who's supposed to be light and chatty and whatever, he has a Pluto Saturn conjunction on my natal sun. So it creates a dynamic that is like very much of a Scorpio.
Yeah, I get that.
So this is kind of like how this these relationship and interaction with your environment, even like the transits of planets that influence our chart, our birth chart, and the energy that we have is kind of like, the discernment, when you understand, like, it's easier for a fish to swim than climb a tree, is that this is the experience part, the grounded part. And for me, I learn mostly from these dynamics, something that I can experience and observe. I like to, unlearn more than I learn sometimes. And if anything, it comes, in a it comes together in a sense that, sometimes you have to learn or like update your learning. You have to add another piece to the puzzle, and then the whole scenery changes.
Yes.
For me, it's like, if you can apply it, what's the point? Because you're just going to get into this like ideas.
Right. Yes.
It's ideas. It's a thought about something, not reality of something.
Right. Yes. I like that. I
Yeah.
love astrology. I'm not very good at astrology yet, but I understand it, and I love the aspects of people's, not just sun sign, their moon signs, their rising signs, and all the planets. It's always changing. And if people could understand that and how other people's are, like you explained, I think we would get along so much better.
Yeah.
In the world.
Well, I think it's about cultivation for the most part. Recently I was trying to make a pumpkin pottage. This is goes back to the story of me learning from my environment.
Okay.
I bought a pumpkin. We had fully blooming vines inside it. Like, the seeds have opened up. Like, I can basically bring the jar and show you. Like, I took them out and put them in fresh water, and soon I'm gonna, move them to the earth. But the thing is that it's, biology, chemistry, human interaction, it's alchemy, it's kind of like co-creation is a word that could kind of like put it together, a co-creative process that we can only understand if we see the entire dynamic. Just like, let's say, my teachers, my learning is a consequence of orchestration around me.
Yes.
Right. but I had people who have taught me a great deal of things. One of them is one of my first mentors as I started to kind of like tap into my spiritual abilities. And she taught me a great deal, although I believe, I mean, it's painful sometimes to work with initiates.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's kind of like, beginning is a place where you feel excited and overwhelmed, and then you also get impatient because you're like wanting to know everything, but then it happens, you're like, oh my God, give me a breather.
Yeah. Wait, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
crazy.
That's fun. Do you have any advice that you want to share with people that
Well, yeah. Lots of advice.
where to begin?
Yeah. Well, oh God. I actually took those before our conversation. Okay. So here's a piece of advice, I guess. I feel I want to put this in a really cool way. What I find very, interesting that kind of like people do, and especially in relation to other people, is I feel like there's a battle of perception going on, like for the most part, because everybody has opinions, everybody has filters on their interpretation, and like, we have filters on our eyes and ears, and it isn't always to our benefit, but that's just the thing, is that what things mean for one person may not necessarily mean for another. Right. So we have to be really like open, and let's say like we want to have this idea about kindness or non-judgment.
Right.
And the thing is that all of these things are actually just parts of a scale of a sort, right? So we have this like experience from, let's say, pain to joy. It's just kind of in nuances that we experience as something being more unpleasant or pleasant, let's say.
Right.
And the thing is with perception, and kind of like our perceptions can be changed by so many things, and they can be influenced by so many things. Right. And I feel like it's not the same thing to engage in a certain dynamic and actually start to observe that dynamic from like a detached, like a seesaw of some sort, right? Right. Because that's why when we get into arguments, is that it's always about me. It's never about us looking in the same direction. Right. Yeah. Like it's always about me being right, me kind of like proving my point, and being right gives me a sense of like I'm in control.
Right.
But it's very like, when you see life from a neutralized perspective, and you understand that death is inevitable, there's just a more pleasant or unpleasant experience of death. Right. But it's happening either way.
Yes.
No one is saying.
We're not getting away from it, right?
So, this is kind of like our perception of something is kind of like how we want to go about it, and how we want to co-create with an idea is up to us. Like the way we, well, quote unquote, respond to a situation or an idea. When I listen to something negative And when we hear something negative, and negativity has to exist, just like we need brakes in our cars, not to, to have a full stop, because negativity is saying no.
Right.
And if you say the no to the wrong things, you do a good thing, you do a positive thing. So it's all very relative as to how we navigate through our gas or yes, and our brakes, saying no to something.
Right.
So we need a certain level of negativity, because we live not only in polarized reality, but also fragmented reality. So there's like much more than actual polarization happening.
Right.
And well, first of all, I feel like, we have to have like a neutral perspective, to not lean either way, to not push and pull, to not, kind of like, this is like the peace of mind, is that whatever can happen will happen.
Right.
So, our peace of mind coming from not having to have control.
Yes.
So whether, I think it's even, showing a bit of like a nuance with like having control, not having it, and not having to have it, because when you don't have to have it, it can go either way.
Right. Yeah.
So, peace, in my recent experience, I don't know, maybe it will evolve, but it comes from accepting that anything is possible in any given moment.
Right.
Anything is possible in any given moment. This is so free. Like, this is, let's say, in face of death, which is like inevitability, there is so much space in between for a lot of possibilities to happen within the time frame that is like kind of like unknowing about a moment of death can be restricting or liberating, depending on how we choose to address it. Mm. So my advice is to actually take the power by realizing that we can add and accessorize with reality, in terms of, let's say, some people say, well, body is sinful, as recently I've heard, in relation to like Christianity. And I thought it was very, funny from some point, because my experience with the body was exactly the opposite.
Right.
Exactly the opposite. And then, understanding that I don't reject the idea. This is where I come off judgment in acceptance. Okay, so the question is, if body was truly sinful, what would I do?
Right.
How do I treat it? Do I terminate it? Do I abuse it? Or do I help heal it? Do I help nurture it, guide it, cultivate it? This is a choice that I can make. This is kind of like also in relation to everybody who's struggling, like, let's say, addicts.
Right.
This is how we treat addiction. It is like a bad person or somebody who needs healing.
Right.
So cultivation, and why I go back to pumpkin seeds, is that we need to understand how we cultivate everything around us.
Right. That's beautifully expressed.
Thanks.
I like that. Yeah. Wonderful.
I hope I summarized it.
You do. That's great. Thank you. Do you have anything else you want to add? Otherwise, we can go over all of your services that you have, or...
Well, I don't think, if there's any question, I'm always open to talk with people, whatever. Yeah.
I think by people watching this, they're going to connect with you and want to work with you. I
I
mean,
don't
you're such a great person, and
know.
I can feel the caring, and your life
Oh,
lessons are going to be amazing to share with them, yeah, and help them.
well, caring, now you actually made me think of something that I was, thinking about earlier about, let's say, caring. And for me, I did also mention I'm not, someone to go easy on people I work with. I try to do my work in least session as possible because I don't want people to be dependent on me.
Right,
And some people are not always comfortable with that because, I mean, of course we establish a connection and like emotional connection,
right,
but the thing is that the whole point of my work, this is why it goes back to my college experience. Like I say, I push them into themselves because they have to live their life, not mine, and obviously have to live mine, not theirs.
right,
So this is kind of like a big thing that, like, sometimes detachment for me is an act of caring, which is not, let's say, always well perceived as such.
right, yeah,
Because if I try to do everything instead of people or for them, then they don't have to do these things for themselves, and it's so very necessary for their stepping into their power, for becoming their own authority, for like if let's say if I believe that the best thing that I can do for someone is to completely pull the rug, then that's what I will do. And it's the, as I say, it's everything is about how it's perceived and received.
right.
you know that you also previously asked me about some guidelines that I have in my work. One of them is not to harm, which I believe is before everything else, to not cause harm. Is sometimes it's very harmful to allow people to be overly dependent on you for either support, advice, or whatever, uh, because it's undermining them as who they are meant to be for themselves and their environment. This is and not even enabling. It's just kind of like, how are they supposed to access their power? My point is to help them access their power.
Right.
So I have to do what is necessary within my integrity, whether it's what they think, is comfortable. I'm not here to make anybody comfortable. I'm here to help you be powerful the way you are, right?
I like that, to help them be
So,
powerful. That's wonderful.
so I feel like we need to help people in a sense, to understand that unpleasant experience is not always to do harm. Is actually sometimes to your greatest benefit, to actually have those growing pains, to be left alone in your process where you're going over your issues of self-abandonment, because you need to sit with yourself. You don't need me there, right?
Right, right.
So if I'm being kind to you, I will not deprive you of this so valuable experience that you need to have for yourself.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
I get that, and I appreciate that. That's very good. Thank you.
Most
Yeah,
welcome.
and that is important, that they learn to. I mean, they come to you for help, but you're helping them to empower themselves. That's great.
Yes. I mean, I'm not always getting them what they want. I try to give them what they need.
That is right, and that's not always what you think you need.
Exactly, because some people want relief, they don't want growth.
Right.
But to me, as we mentioned addiction before, this is kind of like I focus on the long-term benefits. So I'm not gonna like shortly make you comfortable to, you will lose your long-term benefits. So there's no point in like, doing that. It's like, dealing with an addict who wants another shot, and you're like, well, I can relieve you now, or I can help you preserve your health and sobriety in the long term, so that your health wouldn't deteriorate, and then it
Right.
so this is kind of like where not harm comes in. Am I, you have to really be wise to be good.
Right. I agree. Right. Thank you. Do you want to go over your services and how people can find you? And I will post it in the link above. And
they can find me on my personal profile, or on my page, on social media. I'm always available pretty much, and when I'm not, I just respond a bit later.
yeah.
But yes, I mean, I try to be very accessible to people who need me, and I'm open to any question. I just really like when people ask me questions, whether there's something I can do for them, or how it can get done, because a lot of people don't know what the options are because they're not asking.
Right.
And it's very difficult to actually explain healing as something, because it's a process, and in session we have many, as I said, ups and downs. There's always contracting and expanding feeling, when we go into trauma, and then the expansive feeling of liberation afterwards. And then of course there's like an integration, because the physical integration into physical reality is always longer, just because physicality is slower by default. There's nothing I can do about it or anybody else.
Right.
But we can, kind of like free the space energetically for something to be done with much, more ease, grace, and, whatever. But yes, in any way, I am open to any questions. Whenever there's something, whether it be guidance or healing, it's always better to ask. If it's not something I can do, I will not do it.
Right.
Is really easy. I will not promise that it will get done if I don't think that's in my line of work. I feel like, why repair cars when there's a mechanic doing just that? Like, so if there's anything in my field, in my, expertise, or like, that I'm able to serve people, I will, I'm open to, receive their requests and questions to clarify anything about the process or whatever needs clarification.
That's great. Yeah. And you did, I see you sent me your link to your page. So yeah, for social media, and I will hook that on here. Anything else you would like to add before we end here?
Nothing I can think of, except that I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and thank you for taking me down the memory lane.
Well, thank you for agreeing to do it. I know that you are going to just connect with people and help them. Yeah,
I do hope so. Yes.
I know you will. All right. Well, thank you, Alexandria. And my name is again Aleksandra, and we are with Beacons of Light. And thank you so much.